The mountain wind had teeth that night, gnawing at the old ridge lodge as if it meant to swallow it whole. Elias Rowan tightened his parka and stepped onto the darkened porch, counting the seconds until the failing generator would sputter out. Behind him, Coda froze mid-step. The shepherd's ears speared forward, hackles lifting, a low, broken whine shivering from his chest. He wasn't staring at the storm, he was staring at the floorboards, as if something were breathing beneath them. The generator coughed, the lights flickered, and Elias's watch beeped a low battery warning. Then the boards moved. For a moment, Elias thought it was the wind shifting the lodge's frame, but Coda's reaction said otherwise. The shepherd backed up a single step, body low, ears pinned to the strange vibration threading through the planks. Elias knelt, pressing his gloved palm to the floor. The pulse came again subtle, rhythmic, nothing mechanical, almost like a signal struggling through layers of wood and years of dust. A cold breath curled through the hallway behind him. The lights dimmed to a thin, trembling glow. Winter had a talent for silence, but tonight the storm seemed to be listening, waiting. Coda gave a short, urgent chuff and nosed toward the stairwell that led to the basement. Elias hesitated. He'd checked the furnace earlier, everything had seemed fine, but his dog didn't spook easily. Not after the mountains they'd climbed together, not after the rescues that still woke Elias in the night. "All right," he murmured, rising slowly. "Show me." Coda trotted ahead, claws ticking across the boards, leading him toward the dark below. Another tremor rippled beneath them, stronger this time, deliberate. Elias paused at the staircase, breath fogging in the cold air. Something down there was calling them. The stairwell breathed cold into Elias Rowan's face as he descended, each step groaning under his boots. The lodge had settled over years of abandonment, its bones creaking like a creature waking from restless sleep. Coda stayed a single pace ahead, not rushing, not hesitating, alert in that precise, trained way that meant the dog wasn't acting on nerves. He had certainty in every step. Elias switched on his flashlight. The beam cut through dust motes drifting in the air like frozen ash. As he reached the last step, the hum returned low, pulsed, almost like the echo of a heartbeat shivering through the pipes. But then it stopped. Just silence. Heavy. Expectant. Coda circled once and sat beside a warped support beam, staring at the wall. Elias approached, palm brushing old cedar planks, feeling their chill seep through his glove. "You're hearing something I'm not," he murmured. The dog didn't look away, just tilted his head, that barely audible whine rising again from deep in his chest. A communication, not fear. Elias couldn't shake the old instinct, trust the dog first, logic second. It had kept them alive through mountain storms and fractured valleys overseas. But this was supposed to be easier. The lodge was supposed to be a quiet chapter. He exhaled and stepped back. Whatever it is, we'll find it. Coda stood, satisfied for now, and padded toward the stairs. Upstairs, the air felt warmer, though the generator rattled with an uneven sputter that promised future trouble. Elias shut the basement door behind them, the latch clicking softly. That brief tremor still lingered beneath his skin, as if some part of him registered the call even if his ears hadn't. He shook off the thought. Winter in the high ranges made strange music, settling ice, shifting beams, bluffs groaning under their own weight. He'd learned not to assign meaning to every sound, no matter how unusual. Still, Coda rarely misread a signal. Outside, wind scraped at the lodge's shutters. Snow tapped the window panes like 1,000 small fingers. The place was old, older than the map suggested, large timbers blackened by time, beams sagging with the memories of storms long gone. But beneath the neglect, Elias sensed something else. The same feeling he got walking through ruins in Afghanistan history, awake but patient. He pushed a palm through his hair. Gray threaded through dark strands, more now than the year before. He wasn't old, not truly, but life had aged him quicker than time. His shoulders still held military posture straight, deliberate, but his eyes carried the worn look of someone who'd run out of promises to make himself. He reached the front windows and pulled the blinds aside. The world outside was a vast field of white and blue shadows. Snow clung to the pines, bending them into solemn arches. The frozen ridge lake below the lodge stretched like a sheet of hammered silver beneath the clouded sky. The nearest town, Lakeshore Bend, lay 17 miles east, its lights hidden by the slope. Up here, winter changed the rules. You were either prepared or you were gone. Elias let the blinds fall back into place. "Looks like it's just you and me again," he said quietly. Coda gave a soft huff and brushed his head against Elias's leg, the warmth grounding him. Elias Rowan had never intended to end up as caretaker of a forgotten ridge lodge. He'd come to the mountains for work, contract labor, repairs, winter prep, anything that kept his hands busy and his thoughts quieter. After the rescue mission overseas went wrong, after the avalanche, he'd sworn off leadership, sworn off depending on others, or letting them depend on him. Guilt was a strange companion. It didn't shout. It settled in. It waited. At Lakeshore Bend, he'd taken odd jobs, fixing heaters, patching roofs, clearing snow off old porches. He slept in a rented room above a general shop whose owner talked too loudly and laughed too easily. People in town didn't pry. They saw the steady work ethic, the reliability, the quiet courtesy, and simply nodded in return. He kept conversations simple. He kept attachments simpler. But the lodge shifted something in him. It tugged at the part of his mind he'd barricaded away, the part that remembered purpose, structure, service not to a mission, but to people. He didn't want that feeling back, didn't trust himself with it. Yet here he stood, flashlights cutting through the dark, listening to the dog who sensed dangers he couldn't. He reached for the thermostat on the wall. The needle barely moved. The generator was running too cold and the boiler too warm. Something in the system was compensating for something else. Machines out of balance, he muttered. Coda trotted to the back hallway, nose lifted. Elias followed, swinging the flashlight across framed pictures, still hanging by crooked nails. Faded images of past winters, guests smiling in wool coats, children holding cups of cocoa, a woman in a thick sweater standing beside a fireplace, her expression warm and steady. Someone had loved this place. Someone had believed in it. Elias swallowed a knot rising in his throat. He wasn't the man people trusted with legacies, not anymore. Not after what happened to his team, men who'd followed him into the whiteout because he told them it was safe. Men whose bodies the snow never gave back. He shook off the memory and continued down the hall. Coda's nails clicked softly against the wooden floor. He wasn't a nervous dog training, had tempered that out of him long ago. But he was alert, every muscle ready, ears snapping toward any sound. His coat thick, gray, and sable caught faint light with a metallic sheen. Elias liked to say, Coda was the one soldier who never argued, never hesitated, and never questioned the mission. He understood hand signals and voice tone better than most men understood orders. He had been trained for detection work, avalanche scenting, terrain search, but what made him special wasn't training. It was instinct, the kind you couldn't teach. Coda stopped near the lodge's main hearth and placed a paw on a warped plank. This time there was no tremor, no hum. He sniffed once, eyes narrowing, then looked to Elias with a sharp, silent question. Elias knelt beside him. Later, he said softly, we'll get more light in here first. Oh. Coda accepted the answer, though reluctantly. By morning, the storm eased into gentle snowfall, the kind that softened the world's edges. Elias stepped out onto the porch, breath fogging, Coda padding beside him. The air held the smell of cold pine, old snow, and distant wood smoke drifting from the nearest farmhouse far down the ridge. From here, the valley looked unreal. Blue shadows stacked over white hills, pines rising like cathedral pillars. The lodge sat on an incline, its foundation built on stone and stubbornness. He had been trained for detection work, avalanche scenting, terrain search, but what made him special wasn't training. It was instinct, the kind you couldn't teach. Coda stopped near the lodge's main hearth and placed a paw on a warped plank. This time there was no tremor, no hum. He sniffed once, eyes narrowing, then looked to Elias with a sharp, silent question. Elias knelt beside him. Later, he said softly, we'll get more light in here first. Oh. Coda accepted the answer, though reluctantly. Timber beams, some split, some leaning, roof shingles missing in patches. But beneath the decay, Elias saw strength, the shape of a structure built by hands that understood both shelter and hardship. Coda sniffed the wind, giving a rumbling half-growl in the direction of the frozen lake. Elias followed his gaze. Nothing moved out there, just flat ice stretching into morning pale. What is it? Elias asked. The dog didn't answer, of course. He grabbed a few logs, the driest ones he could find, and shut the door again. Coda sniffed at the path leading downhill toward the lake. Elias followed the paw prints. The lake, frozen thick, sprawled beneath them. The ice bore faint cracks like silver veins beneath a sheet of opal. Snow lifted off the surface in delicate spirals when the wind passed. Elias stepped carefully onto the edge, listening to the brittle groan of ice adjusting to weight. "Coda," he said quietly. "Stay." "Hey." The dog obeyed, sitting just off the shoreline, though his muscles vibrated with readiness. Elias tapped the ice with his boot. Solid. But Coda kept watching it as though expecting it to open at any moment. "Okay," Elias said, stepping back. "Enough sightseeing." They returned to the lodge. Inside, Elias built a fire in the hearth. The logs crackled instantly, flames licking upward with a warmth that felt almost undeserved. He'd spent months in silence, preferring metal tools and cold mornings to conversations or company. But here, flame light danced across the walls, brushing warmth into corners long untouched. Coda settled near the fire, stretching out with a deep sigh. His tail thumped twice, just enough to acknowledge the comfort. Elias dropped into an old armchair. Springs creaked under his weight. Snow fell softly outside, brushing against window panes like fingertips searching for warmth. "This isn't so bad," Elias murmured, half smiling. Coda rumbled in agreement, head resting on his paws. A moment of peace. A rare thing. Precious. Then the lodge made a sound small but unmistakable. A single knock beneath the floor, precise and hollow, like a tap on a metal pipe. Coda jolted upright. Elias exhaled slowly, his breath clouding in the cool air. "Yeah," he whispered. "I heard it too." Later that afternoon, Elias drove his truck down the narrow ridge road toward Lakeshore Bend. The path curved through dense pines before opening into the small, snow-draped town with its one main street, post office, supply store, and a diner that smelled of fried onions and winter bacon. People nodded when he walked by, each nod a quiet recognition. They respected privacy in this corner of the mountains, but word traveled fast. As Elias parked near the hardware store, a voice called out, "Rowan, thought you'd frozen yourself up on that ridge." Elias turned to see Jonah Harbs, the town's electrician, waving with a grin. Jonah was a big man with a beard, like a snow-dusted bear rug, and eyes that shone with mischief. "You moved in before we even fixed the road," Jonah said. "Hope you've got a good heater." "Working on it," Elias replied. Jonah chuckled. "You'll need supplies then. Come on, I'll open the back for you." Coda sat in the truck's passenger seat, watching every motion through the window. Jonah leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Dogs got good instincts. Trust them up there. Lodge has history." Elias raised an eyebrow. "History? Ask around," Jonah said, clapping his shoulder. "Or don't. Some stories follow you even when you're trying to forget them." Elias didn't reply. He loaded up on tools, fuel stabilizer, new wiring, pipe sealant, and returned to find Coda's nose pressed against the window, ears high, posture stiff. "What now?" Elias muttered, opening the door. Coda didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stared toward the far end of the street, muscles tense. A sleek black SUV rolled slowly past, windows tinted. Elias didn't recognize the vehicle, but something about the way it moved too slow, too deliberate, sent a prickle up his spine. Coda followed it with unblinking eyes until it disappeared around the bend. "Okay," Elias said quietly, tightening his grip on the steering wheel. "We'll keep an eye on things." They drove back to the ridge. Night fell quickly, draping the mountains in deep blue. Elias got the generator humming again, a fragile success. The fire crackled in the hearth, warmth spreading into the lodge, melting a bit of the cold lodged in his chest. He sat at the kitchen table, sorting through old papers left in a drawer, receipts, faded maps, a guest ledger written in careful but shaky cursive. One loose page caught his attention. It held a rough, hand-drawn sketch of the lodge's foundation, underlined twice, with a mark near the old furnace room labeled Echo Line. Elias frowned. "Echo?" he murmured. Coda, from across the room, lifted his head. "You know the word," Elias said, half smiling. He set the page aside. Something about the notation tugged at him, a reminder of whispered instructions during mountain rescues. Listen for echoes beneath avalanched snow. They meant life or danger. He rubbed his eyes. "We'll check it tomorrow." Coda settled near him, gaze soft. As Elias prepared for bed, the generator flickered again. The lights dimmed to dull amber before stabilizing. He sighed. "One crisis at a time, please." But sleep didn't come easily. Outside, a slow wind drifted across the ridge, brushing the windows with a mournful sigh. The lodge creaked. Snow whispered across the roof. Elias tossed once, then again, shadows shifting on the ceiling. Then faint but unmistakable a metallic clink echoed from beneath the floor. Coda stood instantly, fur rising, eyes sharp. Elias whispered, "Okay, tomorrow we dig deeper." Coda didn't lie back down. He waited until Elias's breathing steadied, then curled at the foot of the bed, body turned toward the door, as if guarding against something Elias couldn't yet see. Outside, snow continued falling over the silent ridge, covering tracks, muting the world, hiding secrets the lodge wasn't finished sharing. Morning crept into the mountains slowly, pale light filtering through clouds that moved like drifting smoke. Elias Rowan woke before sunrise, as he always did, his breath forming faint ghosts in the cool air. The generator had made it through the night barely. Coda rose when he did, stretching long, paws thudding softly on the wooden floor. "You heard it too," Elias murmured. Coda didn't need to answer. His ears were already angled toward the basement door. Elias pulled on his boots, fastened his jacket, and switched on his flashlight. "All right," he said, voice low. "Let's finish what we started." Coda padded ahead, nails tapping the steps in sharp rhythm. Elias followed carefully, the air growing colder with each descending step. When his boots touched the basement floor, he swept the flashlight across the room. Wooden walls, rusted pipes, dust motes in the beam, stillness. Then that faint pulse again. A tremor ran through the support beam near the old furnace, subtle but distinct, like a distant echo. Elias moved closer, pressing a hand against the wood. The vibration repeated, not mechanical, not natural, purposeful. Coda whined softly, pawing once at the floorboards beside the beam. "You found something," Elias said. The plank beneath Coda's paw was slightly raised, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Elias knelt and pressed a fingertip along the edge. Cold air seeped through the seam. He muttered, "Hidden hatch?" Coda sat back, tail stiff, gaze locked onto the spot. Elias grabbed a flathead screwdriver from a nearby workbench. He worked the tool into the seam and pried gently. The board lifted with a hollow creak. Beneath it, darkness and metal. A small latch glinted faintly under the flashlight. Elias exhaled. "Okay, let's see where this goes." He grasped the metal ring and pulled. A narrow trapdoor lifted, revealing a ladder descending into a deeper void. The smell rising from it was cold and metallic, tinged with dust and something older, forgotten air. Coda's ears flicked back. "I'm going first," Elias whispered. "You follow." He climbed down the ladder, boots meeting concrete. Coda followed with practiced precision, landing beside him in silence. The hidden space was larger than expected, a narrow corridor with low ceiling beams, lined with insulated walls. Papers littered the floor, torn maps, old supply tags, a crumpled inspection sheet dated 1993. Elias's flashlight caught something on the far wall. A rusted metal box, no bigger than a toolkit, fixed to the wall with strange bolts. He approached slowly, breath tight in his chest. "What were you storing down here?" The box bore a faded, stenciled emblem, an old mountain rescue insignia, the kind Elias hadn't seen in years. A snow peak triangle, a small star above it. Coda sniffed the air, tail rising. Elias flipped the latch. The lid opened with a dry metallic sigh. Inside lay a folded topographic map, a weather-worn notebook, and a small radio device, portable, military-grade, the kind used in emergency beacon systems. Elias swallowed hard. The notebook's first page read, "For the next keeper, if the mountains still speak, listen. If the line still hums, follow it." His breath stilled. "Coda, this wasn't just a lodge." He turned a page. It was a relay outpost. The dog let out a soft, questioning growl. Elias scanned the subsequent entries' coordinates, timestamps, handwritten notes about storms, rescues, avalanches. The last page ended mid-sentence, ink dragging off the paper as if written in urgency. "Signal source moving. Not natural. If anyone finds this..." The line ended abruptly. Elias read. Something in him, his instincts, his old training, clicked back into place. The tremors, the hum, Coda's response. None of it was random. Something beneath the ridge, or inside the mountain, was sending out signals again. And someone had known this would happen. He folded the map open. A red line circled the lodge, then extended toward a ridge path leading to an area marked only with an X. Beneath it, the word, Echoline. Elias's pulse quickened. That word again. Before he could study further, Coda stiffened, nose pointed toward the ladder above. His ears twitched alert. Warning. Footsteps. Slow. Crunching through snow directly above the basement. Elias snapped the flashlight off. Darkness swallowed them. He whispered, "Quiet." Coda didn't make a sound. Snow shifted above. Then boots scraped wooden floorboards. Someone was inside the lodge. Elias pressed his back against the wall, listening. The intruder moved cautiously, not wandering, searching. Coda leaned against Elias's leg, waiting for a command. A beam of light flickered over the trapdoor seam. Whoever it was had found the basement, but not the hatch. Not yet. Elias closed his hand over his multi-tool. He wasn't equipped for a fight, but he didn't need to win, he only needed to wait. The intruder moved through the basement slowly, methodically. Metal clinked. A toolbox lid. A pipe valve turning. Something being inspected. Then toes tapped near the support beam. A low grunt of disappointment. Finally, the footsteps receded. The basement door creaked open, and cold air rushed in as the intruder stepped outside. Elias waited another full minute before climbing up. Back in the basement proper, he scanned with the flashlight. The toolbox had been opened, a wrench displaced. A coil of wire unwound and left on the floor. Snow thickened as Elias parked outside the town hall. Lakeshore Bend's main street was alive with winter noise plow trucks rumbling, people shoveling storefront steps, a stray dog barking somewhere near the bakery. Coda hopped out, tail low but deliberate. He scanned the sidewalk as if cataloging every scent on the wind. Inside the hall, Councilman Harlan Dempsey stood behind a counter, papers stacked high, his suit jacket strained at the buttons. By afternoon, the storm clouds thickened again. Snow drifted in long white waves across the ridge. Elias stood on the porch, arms folded. The hidden bunker, the old relay device, the unfinished note, the intruder tampering with the boiler, the beacon hum beneath the floor. Coda sat beside him, scanning the tree line. "Someone's trying to shut this place down," Elias said. Coda whuffed softly in agreement. Elias tightened his gloves. "And someone else left this for me, or for whoever came next." He looked again at the ridge trail, stretching into the pines. He'd sworn never to lead again, never to follow a signal into danger, never to let responsibility drag him back into the world he'd walked away from. But the mountains didn't care about vows. They only cared about those who listened. He unfolded the topographic map. The red X nearly pulsed beneath his fingers. Coda nudged his elbow, urging him forward. Elias let out a shaky breath. "All right," he whispered. "We follow it." He turned toward the lodge door, resolve settling in his bones like cold steel. "We're not running from this," he said. "We're running toward it." Coda barked once sharp, certain, and the inciting incident sealed itself. Elias Rowan stepped off the porch into gathering snow, choosing the path that would define everything that came next. Coda's paw prints trailed behind Elias as he climbed the ridge trail, the map folded in his coat pocket, the cold chewing at every exposed seam of fabric. The mountains loomed high above the lodge, dark shapes against slate-colored dawn. Snow drifted sideways on lazy wind gusts, never fully falling, never fully settling. Something in the air felt suspended, unfinished. Coda moved steadily, nose lifted, reading the world in layers Elias couldn't see. "Wherever this X leads," Elias muttered, "I hope it's not another abandoned cellar." Coda glanced back once, amber eyes flashing with a confidence Elias didn't share. They climbed higher, boots crunching on frostbitten earth. The forest changed subtly, pines grew starker, their trunks twisted by old storms, branches gripped by ice. Occasionally, Coda paused, sniffed the air, then continued. They reached a narrow cut in the mountain, where wind funneled like a whisper through stone. Coda ducked under a fallen log. Elias followed. Then Coda stopped sharply. His ears pricked forward, tail rising. "What do you hear?" The shepherd barked once quiet but urgent and trotted ahead faster. Elias jogged behind him, breath turning ragged. The trail opened into a clearing. There, half buried beneath snowdrift, was the roofline of a collapsed structure. Old timbers jutted out like ribs. The snow had softened the jagged edges, but even through frost, Elias recognized a construction style decades old. Coda trotted around the ruins, nose pressed to the wind. "This was on the map," Elias breathed. "The founder's first shelter?" He brushed snow off the largest beam. Carved into the wood were faint letters, nearly erased by storms. "Whitlow Ridge Shelter, 1968. For all who lose their way." Elia's breath caught. "A rescue shelter," He hadn't expected the words to hit him so hard, but they did, like someone pressing on a bruise he thought had healed. Coda barked sharply and ran toward the far corner of the ruin. He began digging furiously. Snow flew. Dirt scattered. Elias rushed over. "Coda, easy." The dog stopped only when Elias touched his shoulder. Beneath the freshly exposed earth lay a metal trapdoor, hinges rusted but intact. Elias wiped frost from the center. A small star was engraved there, the same star from the rescue insignia in the hidden bunker. His pulse quickened. "We're opening it." He wedged a pry bar beneath the handle. It took 3 tries, but the hatch finally groaned open with a sharp crack. Below was darkness and stairs. They descended. The air below was colder, older, preserved in stone. Elias swept the flashlight across the passage. Wooden shelves lined one wall empty now. The opposite side held hooks and brackets where climbing harnesses once hung. The floor was scattered with shards of tin cups, dried leather straps, and rusted tools. A faint metallic odor clung to the air. Coda navigated the space with practiced caution, ears rotating with each distant drip of melting snow. At the far end, a narrow door hung half open. Elias nudged it. It led into a round chamber carved directly into the mountainside. The walls held metal panels, early relay equipment, wiring, conduit, battery housings long since cold. And in the center sat a tall, narrow cylinder bolted to a concrete pedestal. A relay tower core. Elias stepped closer, breath fogging. Dust coated the outer shell, but the design was unmistakable. "Mountain search and rescue," he whispered. "This was a beacon node." Coda whined, shifting his weight. Elias touched the panel. "This is what you heard under the lodge." Something buzzed faintly under his palm. The cylinder wasn't dead. A tiny LED flickered deep inside the panel, weak, erratic, but unmistakably alive. Elias jerked his hand back. "How the?" He scanned the base. An old battery pack remained attached, half corroded, but the light's rhythm didn't match battery flicker. It pulsed like it was receiving something, an echo bouncing through circuitry built for mountain storms. "And we're not getting them alone." Coda barked once, quick and decisive. They began the trek back down toward the town. Elias stared at the hidden shelter beneath the ruins. This wasn't coincidence. The trap door in the lodge. The relay device. The unfinished message. Now, an entire beacon chamber hidden beneath a fallen shelter. It wasn't broken equipment misfiring. Someone or something was sending out a signal again. He folded the map. The red X pointed directly here. The founder had left instructions, and Elias was following them. He turned to Coda. "We need answers." Coda ducked under a fallen log. Elias followed. Then Coda stopped sharply. His ears pricked forward, tail rising. "What do you hear?" The shepherd barked once quiet but urgent and trotted ahead faster. Elias jogged behind him, breath turning ragged. The trail opened into a clearing. There, half buried beneath snowdrift, was the roofline of a collapsed structure. Old timbers jutted out like ribs. Coda ducked under a fallen log. Elias followed. Then Coda stopped sharply. His ears pricked forward, tail rising. "What do you hear?" The shepherd barked once quiet but urgent and trotted ahead faster. Elias jogged behind him, breath turning ragged. The trail opened into a clearing. There, half buried beneath snowdrift, was the roofline of a collapsed structure. Old timbers jutted out like ribs. His expression held that thin courtesy he reserved for people he didn't intend to help. "Well, Mr. Rowan," he drawled, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" Elias removed his gloves. "I need building records, anything tied to the lodge, particularly the North Ridge structures." Dempsey's smile tightened. "You don't have access." Coda growled, low and quiet. Dempsey eyed the dog warily. "Control your animal." "He's controlled," Elias replied. "You should worry about yourself." "Aye." Dempsey tapped his pen. "You're wasting your time with that property. Regulations won't let you keep it open. I'll make it compliant." "That's impossible," Dempsey said. "The foundation is outdated, the heating system is antique, and you have an upcoming inspection. You'll fail, guaranteed." Elias stepped forward. "Unless someone tampers with the systems." Dempsey's eyes darted a flicker of something he hadn't meant to reveal. Elias caught it. "You know," he said softly, "it's strange I found the boiler valve loosened this morning." Dempsey didn't answer. Coda stepped between them, tail stiff, ears forward. Elias leaned in. "Stay away from the lodge. Next time I won't assume you came alone." He turned and walked out before Dempsey could respond. Snow crunched behind him. Coda stayed close. The dog's posture was tense but steady, calm aggression. "Good boy," Elias murmured. Behind them, through the frosted glass, Dempsey watched in simmering silence. Driving back up the ridge, snow fell thicker, each flake swirling like ash. Something about the white silence stirred Elias's memories. He gripped the wheel tighter. The storm, the avalanche, his team calling out through the radio, the way the world had collapsed in one long roar. He inhaled sharply. Coda reached over from the passenger seat, pressing his nose gently against Elias's wrist. A silent command. "Stay here, not back there." "Yeah," Elias whispered. "I'm trying." "Sabotage?" Elias's jaw tightened. Someone had tampered with the pressure valve on the boiler, loosened it by half a turn. Enough to cause a shutdown. Enough to force a code violation if an inspector found it. Coda sniffed the ground, growled low, then followed the scent to the exterior door. Elias whispered, "I know, buddy. We'll track it later." He tightened the valve, closed the toolbox, and shut the basement door firmly. He wasn't alone up here. The output had been manually increased. Someone had been inside. Coda. The shepherd trotted to the back hallway, hackles lifting. He sniffed around the kitchen, then the pantry. Then, without warning, he barked sharply, darted to the basement door, and pawed at it violently. Elias grabbed the flashlight, heart racing. He swung the door open. Everything looked normal until they reached the bottom. The hidden hatch. It stood open. The map was gone. The old notebook, too. Elias dropped to one knee. Boot prints fresh, small, deliberate, marked the floor near the hatch. Not Dempsey's, someone lighter, quicker. Coda sniffed the prints, growled, and bolted toward the exterior door at the top of the stairs. "Hold on," Elias called, sprinting after him. They reached the porch. Snowstorm wind blasted across the ridge. Coda stopped, nose pressed to the wind, then took off westward along the ridge trail. By afternoon, winds stiffened. Tree branches creaked, shedding icy dust. Elias and Coda reached the lodge as snow began spiraling across the porch. Elias shut the door behind them, and immediately felt something was wrong. The room was warmer than expected. Too warm. The generator hummed steadily, no sputter, no flicker. He frowned. "We didn't leave it running this high." Coda circled the room, nose twitching, tail slowly rising. Elias checked the control panel. They reached the lake's edge. Snow whipped their faces. Ice groaned beneath drifts. The survey lights glared across the frozen expanse like interrogation lamps. Then Elias saw them. Two figures. One tall, broad. One small, quick, agile. The intruder from the lodge. And someone much more dangerous. The tall figure shouted something over the wind, pointing toward the ice. Coda growled. Elias whispered, "Stay low." He crept closer, boots silent in fresh snow. Back inside the lodge, Elias sat at the table. The notebook open, snow melting off his coat, fire crackling quietly in the hearth. Coda lay nearby watching him, sensing the shift in his breathing. Elias stared at the flickering flames. The memory surfaced unwelcome, raw, bright mountain glare. Snowfields. Radio crackling with static. "Captain Rowan, we're losing visibility." Then the roar. The world buckling. The white ocean swallowing his team. Shouts cutting off one by one. Silence. He clenched his jaw. Coda rose quietly and nudged his knee. A grounding touch. Elias whispered, "I should have known. I should have heard it." The old guilt clamped around his chest. But then, a soft click snapped through the room. The radio. The old one on the shelf. Its indicator flickered once, twice, then held. Elias rose slowly. "What now?" He stepped closer. Static whispered through the speaker. Then a faint voice, thin, distant, emerged through static like a ghost crawling through old wiring. "Keeper, if the line hums, follow." Elias recoiled. Not fear. Recognition. The voice was old. Not supernatural. Not imagined. Someone had recorded instructions long ago. A message meant for the next person who would carry the lodge's duty. Coda whined softly, ears forward. Elias whispered, "This all connects. The relay, the shelters, the map." He turned toward the notebook. Flipped pages, near the back, written in hurried script. "The lodge is only the middle station. The true beacon lies beneath the ridge lake." Elias's breath caught. Beneath the lake? He grabbed the map, but it was gone. Stolen. He slammed the notebook shut. "We need the rest of the picture." Coda barked once sharp, like he already had a new lead. Evening pressed in early. The storm thickened, swirling snow like smoke against the windows. Elias walked the perimeter of the lodge, checking shutters. Coda paced beside him, muscles tense. At the generator shed, Coda froze. He sniffed the air, growled deep. Elias unlatched the shed door slowly. Inside, wires lay scattered. The fuel line had been cut nearly through, dangling by a thread. Elias exhaled through clenched teeth. They want the heat to fail. Elias followed, footing unsteady, breathing sharp until they reached the overlook above the lake. There, half covered by snow, lay the old notebook. The intruder had dropped it. Elias grabbed it, flipping to the last written line. The mountains remember. The lodge must open again. His pulse hammered. Coda barked down the slope. Elias looked. Tracks, small boots leading away from the lodge and disappearing into the tree line. Someone had stolen the map, but left the notebook. He'd seen these tactics overseas enemy cutoffs before an assault. Coda nudged him forward. Right, Elias whispered. Let's get inside. Inside, Elias spread the notebook pages across the table again. He skimmed earlier entries he'd dismissed as poetic ramblings. Now they read differently. Shelter must continue. If mountains silence our voices, build louder ones. Beacons don't call the lost. They call those who listen. Then, on a water-damaged page, North Ridge Lodge, designated MRS Station 4. Purpose: Winter Rescue Hub. Keep flames lit. Keep beacon active. Keep doors open. Elias starred. Station 4, he breathed. Mountain Rescue Station 4. This place wasn't just a lodge. It was part of an old emergency rescue network. A network the county never mentioned. A network that could save lives in winter storms and would threaten any developer's plan to commercialize the ridge. Coda lifted his head sharply. He trotted to the window and stared out into the storm. What is it? A long, low groan echoed outside, like ice shifting beneath immense pressure. Then a bright flash lit the ridge. Elias's heart stuttered. Lightning? In a snowstorm? Another groan. Another flash. No, not lightning. Lights. Human-made. Coda barked, darting to the door. Elias threw on his coat and followed him outside. They climbed the hill behind the lodge. Through whirling snow, Elias saw beams of artificial light cutting through the blizzard. Not flashlights, not lanterns. Survey lights. Industrial grade. Pointing directly at the lake. Elias whispered, "Someone's working out there." Coda growled deep, tail rising like a flag of warning. Elias understood. The developer. The sabotage. The urgency. The stolen map. It all aligned. Someone wanted to shut down the old rescue network. And they were starting with the lake. The lake that hid the true beacon. The core station. He exhaled sharply. We're in this now. Coda barked once agreement and readiness. End of crowd. The intruder hadn't come for supplies. They'd come to sabotage the lodge. Footprints led away from the shed, 2 sets. One small, one much larger and deeper. Someone had joined the intruder. Coda growled. Elias shut the shed door. This is no accident. Someone wants the lodge shut down permanently. He stared into the dark tree line. He didn't know who they were, but he knew the pattern. Isolate. Disrupt. Force closure. He heard fragments of the tall man's voice. Didn't pay you to bring the damn book. Find the vent location, before the county gets involved. The small figure didn't answer, only held out the map. Elias's breath caught. His map. The tall man snatched it, scowled at the markings, then barked. Wrong reading. The vent's deeper. He slammed a metal rod through the ice. The lake cracked sharply. Coda tensed. If they broke through the ice near the vent during a storm, the whole lake could destabilize. Elias stepped out, voice carrying over the wind. Drop it. Both figures spun. The tall man sneered. Rowan, you're trespassing on protected land, Elias said. Drop the tool and step back. The smaller figure shifted nervously. Coda growled, advancing a single step. The tall man lifted the rod. This ridge belongs to the developer now. No, Elias said. It belongs to the people who survive winter. And you're standing on a rescue station. The big man laughed. That network's dead. We're building something better. Elias stepped closer. Sabotage won't make it true. The tall man lunged. Coda bolted. The fight was chaotic, snow blinding them both. The tall man swung the rod. Elias blocked it with his forearm, pain flaring. Coda lunged, forcing the man back. The smaller figure hesitated, then ran into the storm, disappearing into drifting white. Coda barked after them. No, Elias shouted. Stay with me. The tall man scrambled back, slipping on ice. He grabbed the survey lights, flicked a switch, and the lights died. Darkness swallowed the lake. By the time Elias blinked away the afterimage, the tall man was gone, vanished into the storm with the map. Coda pressed against his leg, panting. Elias knelt, hand on the dog's back. Good boy, good boy. The lake groaned beneath them. A long, deep fracture spread like lightning under the surface. Time to go. They retreated to the lodge, hearts hammering, snow slashing their backs. Inside, Elias collapsed into a chair, staring at the fire. Coda curled near his feet, exhausted. Elias whispered, "This place, it was built to save people, and I couldn't even save my own men." The old avalanche memory surged sharper than before, faces, voices, the storm swallowing them. He pressed his palms to his eyes. "I shouldn't be the keeper," he whispered. "I shouldn't lead." Coda rose and rested his chin on Elias's knee, a touch as steady as a heartbeat. Elias looked at him. "You still believe in me," he whispered. Coda blinked slowly, his silent way of saying yes. Elias inhaled deeply, shaking. "The mountains choose who listens. That's what the notebook says." He rose. "So I'll listen." He grabbed his coat. "We finish what the founder started." Coda barked one sharp, clear note. The fire crackled behind them. Snow howled outside. The ridge trembled with unfinished purpose. And Section 4 ended with Elias Rowan stepping fully into the role he'd spent years running from. Keeper of North Ridge. Protector of the rescue line. Leader again, whether he believed in it or not. The storm arrived before dawn, a white wall swallowing the ridge with the fury of a living thing. Winds slammed into the lodge so hard the beams groaned like warhorses under strain. Snow churned sideways, thick as smoke. Nothing existed beyond the porch except shifting whiteness, no horizon, no landmarks, only a world erased. Inside, Elias Rowan cinched his parka tight and checked the fuel lines again. The generator held, humming low and steady. Heat pulsed through the lodge vents in soft waves. But the pressure outside grew heavier, by the minute a blizzard deep enough to bury entire cabins, break power lines, and trap travelers on forgotten mountain roads. The kind of storm rescue stations were built for. Coda paced by the window, ears tilted toward the wind, tail low but firm, a soldier's readiness. Elias knelt beside him. "Storm's bad," he said, "but we're ready." Coda didn't turn his head, kept staring at the door instead. A knock punched through the howling wind. 3 rapid hits. Urgent, desperate. Elias froze. "Who the—" He reached the door, unlatched it, and pulled it open against the storm's wrath. Snow blasted inward. A man stumbled in, half collapsed, arms wrapped around a teenage girl whose lips were blue. "Help, please," the man gasped. "Truck, slid off the ridge. Others still down there can't see." Coda barked sharply, rushing to support the girl with his body heat. Elias guided them both inside and slammed the door. "Sit her near the fire," he said. "You too catch your breath." But the man pushed Elias's arm away. "There are more. 2 families. Carried her because she couldn't walk anymore. The others, trapped on the lower trail. How far? Maybe half a mile. But the wind," his voice broke. "I couldn't find my way back." Elias's pulse hammered. "How many?" 5, maybe 6. Kids too. Coda let out a low, vibrating rumble that cut straight through Elias's chest. A warning, a plea, a command. They needed him. Elias grabbed his rescue pack rope coil, harness, thermal blankets, flares. He strapped on his crampons, pulled his headlamp low, and opened the door. The man shouted over the storm, "You can't go alone!" A sharp bark from Coda answered before Elias could. "He's not going alone," Elias said. "Coda leads." The man stared at the dog as if seeing salvation wrapped in gray and sable fur. Elias leaned down. "Find them." Coda sprang into the gale without hesitation. The blizzard swallowed them instantly. Wind slammed into Elias, driving needles of ice into his face. He lowered his head, keeping one arm raised to shield his eyes. Coda moved ahead, a dark shape cutting through the swirling white. Elias kept one hand on the dog's harness, letting Coda determine direction. Every few seconds, Coda stopped, lifted his nose, recalibrated, and surged forward again with renewed certainty. Visibility, 5 feet. Temperature, falling fast. Margin of error, none. Elias shouted into the wind, "Good boy, keep going." The dog's ears flicked back in brief acknowledgement. Minutes passed without shape or sound except the storm's roar. Then Coda froze. His body stiffened, ears tightened, tail straight as a directional spike. He lunged left. Elias followed and nearly stepped into emptiness. A pickup truck lay twisted on its side down a shallow ravine, half buried under a fresh avalanche drift. A man's arm waved weakly from the window. Elias dropped to his knees. "Sir, you hurt?" A muffled voice answered. "We're stuck. Kids are in the back." Coda barked and circled the truck, digging frantically at the snow on the backside. "Okay," Elias said. "We dig, then we lift." He pulled out his rescue shovel. Coda dug beside him, powerful paws slicing through snow like blades. Together they uncovered the back door. Elias wedged his shoulder under the frame and heaved, metal bent. The door gave. Inside were 3 children clutching blankets, eyes wide with fear. A woman held a toddler against her chest. Elias passed them out one by one, Coda licking each child's hand to calm them. When the last kid emerged, the woman broke into sobs. "We thought no one would find us." Elias shook his head. "The lodge is open. It's what it was built for." He stood, helping them form a human chain. The wind screamed around them, but Coda's presence held the group steady. "Stay close," Elias shouted. "We move now." They began climbing the path back up. Then, a sharp crack split the air. Elias spun. The ground sagged around the truck. A secondary avalanche break. "Coda, go!" Elias yelled. The shepherd barked, darted forward, herding the children uphill with urgent nudges. Elias sprinted behind them, snow collapsing just feet from his boots. They reached the ridge. The truck below vanished under a tidal wave of white. The woman sobbed harder. Elias wrapped her in his arm. "You're safe," he said. "Let's get you warm." Coda's tail wagged, once soft, reassuring, purposeful. He'd saved them all. When they reached the lodge, people flooded the room, travelers sheltering from the storm, the earlier man, neighbors who'd come seeking heat. Coda guided the survivors toward the hearth, licking ice off the children's coats. Elias slammed the door shut and knelt to unwrap their boots. "Any numbness? Any pain?" The father shook his head. "Just cold. You got to us just in time." Elias nodded. "We'll warm you up." But just as he grabbed a stack of blankets, the lights flickered, then died. The room gasped as darkness swallowed the walls. Coda growled, ears angled downward. "No," Elias whispered. "Not now." He lunged for the generator panel. The fuel gauge showed nearly empty. "How?" he muttered. "I filled it yesterday." Then he saw it. A drilled hole near the base. Fuel leaking into the snow below. Sabotage. Again, Dempsey's people, Elias breathed. "They're trying to force a shutdown." The room trembled from a violent gust outside. The temperature was already dropping. The woman Elias rescued clutched her toddler. "We'll freeze." "You won't," Elias said. "Not while I'm here." He turned to the others. "I need volunteers to help me switch to the backup boiler. Moves fast. Anyone?" Jonah Harbs, the big electrician, raised his hand. "I'm in." Mrs. Lucinda Hale lifted her ladle, cheeks red. "You'll get soup in your veins, soldier, but I'll help." More hands rose. Elias nodded. "We do this together." "Stay close," Elias shouted. "We move now." They began climbing the path back up. Then, a sharp crack split the air. Elias spun. The ground sagged around the truck. A secondary avalanche break. "Coda, go!" Elias yelled. The shepherd barked, darted forward, herding the children uphill with urgent nudges. Elias sprinted behind them, snow collapsing just feet from his boots. They reached the ridge. The truck below vanished under a tidal wave of white. The woman sobbed harder. Yona's eyebrows shot up. "That's insane." "It'll work," Elias said. "It was meant to." Coda barked a second time, sharp, insistent. Elias pointed toward the basement. "Let's go." They descended quickly, Elias, Jonah, and Coda. Wind screamed through the boards above. Snow shook the lodge walls. They reached the hidden ladder. Elias climbed first. Coda followed silently. The relay chamber's air felt charged, vibrating faintly in the dark. Jonah exhaled sharply. "Holy hell, this is old tech." "And good tech," Elias said. "We get it running, we power the lodge." Elias approached the beacon core. Coda sat at his heel, eyes sharp. Jonah studied the wiring. "It's missing a starter link." Elias pulled a small metal connector from his pocket, the one he'd salvaged from the furnace days earlier. "Will this do?" Jonah blinked. "Rowan, that's perfect." They clipped it in place. The circuits hummed faintly. But before Jonah could activate the switch, footsteps echoed down the passage. Elias spun. Calder Stroud, the developer, stepped from the shadows, coat dusted with snow, eyes cold and furious. "You're interfering with my property," Stroud said. "You have no idea what you're tampering with." Elias stood firm. "This isn't your ridge." "It will be. I'm stopping you right now." He pulled a compact cutting torch from his coat aimed at the core wiring. Elias stepped in front of it. Coda snarled, teeth bared. Stroud laughed bitterly. Move, Rowan. No. This rescue relic dies tonight, Stroud snarled. And the lodge with it. He triggered the torch with a sharp hiss. But before the flame touched the wires, Coda lungit. The shepherd launched like a gray streak, fast, precise, controlled, not attacking Stroud's body but the torch itself. His jaws clamped around the handle, wrenching it sideways just as it sparked. The flame died instantly. Stroud yelped and stumbled backward into the wall. Coda dropped the torch at Elias's feet, growling low but steady. Elias stepped forward, towering over Stroud. You're finished. Stroud spot. The county won't back you when they hear you tried to kill people in a storm. Jonah spoke from behind, voice cold. And we got witnesses. Lots. Stroud's expression shattered. Elias turned back to the relay. Let's light this place. Jonah flipped the switch. The beacon core roared. Old wiring glowed alive. Deep within the structure, geothermal heat surged through metal arteries. Pipes trembled upstairs as warmth expanded through vents. The lodge breathed again stronger than ever. Stroud collapsed to his knees, defeated. Coda rested his chin on Elias's boot, steadying him through the tremor of adrenaline. Elias knelt and whispered, Good boy, you saved them. Coda's tail brushed the floor. By morning, the storm eased into a gentle quiet. The lodge stood warm and bright, fires burning, vents humming, windows glowing. The rescued families slept safely on blankets near the hearth. Elias stepped outside onto the porch. The world was reborn. Snow glittered like broken glass across the ridge. Frost sparkled on tree branches. The frozen lake stretched beneath a golden sunrise, cracks refreezing into delicate lace. Coda stepped beside him, brushing against his leg. Elias placed a hand on his neck. Feels different now. Coda looked up at him, eyes calm. You knew before I did, Elias whispered. About the beacon, about what this place needed. Coda leaned into the touch, soft and warm. Voices rose behind them. Jonah, the rescued families, Mrs. Hale, neighbors from town. One by one they stepped onto the porch, staring at the sunrise. Rowan, Jonah said quietly, you turned this place into a miracle. Elias shook his head. The mountains built it. I just listened. Nora Keats, the county inspector, arrived on snowshoes, breath fogging in the cold. She surveyed the repaired lodge, the geothermal system humming beneath the floor, and nodded slowly. You've met every requirement, she said. The lodge is officially registered as Ridge Rescue Station 4, community property, protected land, permanently. Elias exhaled a long, trembling breath. Coda barked once bright, triumphant. A ripple of laughter followed. Nora folded her arms. Congratulations, Keeper. Elias blinked. What? That's your title now, she said with a half-smile. The mountain rescue line has a new leader. Elias opened his mouth, but Coda nudged his hand with a firm push, eyes gleaming. Elias chuckled. All right, buddy, Keeper it is. The group stepped together onto the ridge overlook. The world was peaceful, alive, warm. The lodge's chimney puffed steady smoke into the crisp air. And far beneath them, carried lightly across the lake, came a faint echo like the mountains whispering approval. Elias breathed deeply. Let's keep the light on, he said softly. Coda pressed against him, and the mountains, at last, were quiet. Morning settled softly over the ridge, the kind of morning that felt earned. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a world carved fresh and clean. Sunlight poured down in gentle gold, catching on every drift and icicle until the mountain seemed dusted in sparks. Elias Rowan stepped out onto the porch with a mug of coffee warming his hands. Coda padded beside him, paws silent on the wooden boards, breath-puffing white clouds into the calm air. For the first time since arriving at the lodge, Elias didn't feel the weight of unfinished business pressing between his shoulder blades. No intruders, no hum beneath the floorboards, no signals lost in static, only the steady pulse of a place finally functioning as it was meant to. He sat on the top step, letting the quiet wrap around them both. Coda lay close, head resting on Elias's boot, amber eyes taking in the horizon as if guarding it. You know, Elias murmured, I never meant to stay. Coda's tail thumped once, soft but firm, as if saying he already knew the ending of that particular sentence. Elias took a slow sip of coffee. The steam curled upward and dissolved into the bright air. Everywhere we've been, we were passing through, just trying to keep moving, trying not to hear the things I didn't want to face. He didn't elaborate, he didn't need to. The dog had lived all of it with him, quiet motel rooms, evening walks through towns that never became home, the restless nights when memories pressed too sharply against sleep. But something changed here, Elias said, glancing at the lodge behind them. The windows glowed with life. Inside, he could hear faint voices, neighbors making breakfast, a child laughing, the kettle rattling over the stove. This place, it isn't just a roof, it's a purpose. Coda nudged his leg gently. Elias smiled. Yeah, you're right. Purpose is easier to carry when you're not alone. A slow breeze drifted across the ridge, carrying the clean scent of snow and pine. Birds returned tentatively, hopping along the railing as if auditioning for spring. Down near the lake, the sunlight caught the frozen surface and set it shimmering in ripples of blue and white. Elias let his shoulders relax. You know what I realized last night? When everything was coming apart, when the generator died and the storm hit and those people needed us, I wasn't afraid. Not of the mountain, not of the storm, not of failing. He paused, searching for the right words. I was afraid we'd lose this chance to make something right. Coda shifted closer, pressing warmth into Elias's side. The truth settled in Elias's chest with the clarity of clear air. He had spent years trying to outrun the memory of the rescue he couldn't finish, the operation that haunted his dreams. But the lodge had offered him a second story to write, a different ending. It's strange, he said softly. Sometimes you think redemption comes from doing something big, something heroic, but maybe it's just choosing to stay, to keep a light on, to help the next soul who stumbles through the cold. Coda huffed quietly in agreement. Elias looked back toward the sunlit ridge. The world felt wider now, not because it had changed, but because he had stopped bracing against it. I think Whitaker knew, Elias said. He saw it before I did, saw the shape of what this place could be, saw what I needed before I ever said it out loud. His voice warmed. Guess the old man left more than a mission. He left hope. The wind shifted gently, brushing past them like a silent nod. Elias stood, stretching his back. Come on, Keeper, he said, testing the new title with a small smile. Let's check the vents before the next storm decides to challenge us. Coda stood too, shaking snow from his coat. Together they stepped forward, man and dog, side by side, walking back into the lodge where warmth waited and purpose lived. The mountains behind them glowed bright beneath the rising Sunday. And for the first time in a long time, Elias Rowan felt steady, rooted, home. And